Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Human Echoes recap for Legion, Season 1, Episode 6, Chapter 6. And I just want to start off by addressing something that I've seen a lot in comments boards, particularly on Reddit threads discussing this episode. A lot of people saying either A, this is a bottle episode, or B, this was a filler episode. And I think the first one comes from not understanding what a bottle episode is, and the second one is stupid. Because, listen, this episode, more than any of the other episodes, had, really nailed down some stuff that we didn't know for sure before, right? Especially at the end there with Lenny and her, villainous monologue about how worthless life is and how she's been with David since birth and how she knew his father, and we see her traipsing through his memories in that amazing dream sequence. All of that stuff is really giving us super concrete evidence that A, for sure she's the yellow-eyed demon. We know that beyond a shadow of a doubt now. We know more of what her motivations are, of what she plans to do with David. She literally wants to take over the world and become God and destroy all life. I feel like all of that stuff is not filler. And on top of that, going back to Clockworks was a really, really effective way to dig into these characters' psyches. I mean, to start at the beginning of the episode, we have Lenny as psychologist deconstructing these people's deals, right? She's psychoanalyzing them. That's the word for it. She's asking them questions, talking about their deep-seated fears. And while these are slightly different versions of the characters that we know from the show, Jean Smart, whose name I finally remember, she's acting somewhat more childish. Now we have Carrie and Carrie split up for good. They're in separate bodies now because it wouldn't make sense. Their delusion. We see all these things playing out as delusions, but we also see that they actually do have these real mental problems. Jean Smart in particular, waiting for her husband to come back, stuck in the past, essentially, keeping him frozen so that he can come save her. While the end of the argument, the end of the episode does bear that out, right? It does end up seeming like, well, maybe that was a good decision. From a very realistic standpoint, not just that, but the fact that she hasn't changed anything, that she's left all of his clothes the way they are, that she hasn't been able to move on, even though there is something weird going on with him and his whole deal and him being in the ice cube, it's still unhealthy for her. It still must have stunted her growth and affected her in some important way. Tanami talking about his mother's death as a child and how that affected him. All of these are very real mental problems. Speaking of Tanami and his mom's death, I go back and forth on whether that might be connected to David's idea of the world's angriest boy in the world and his mother's death. If these are all people who are somehow entangled in David's mind, as I have argued that they are, not necessarily that they're not their own people, but maybe they have pieces of David's memories lodged in them. Tanami obviously talks about his dad being stationed in Germany, going off to the war. That doesn't really fit with what we know about David and his memories, but the death of the mother definitely does. And that's something we're just going to have to wait and see. Maybe that's a thing, maybe it's not. But it felt interesting that there is that parallel there. And I don't know, it could be completely coincidence. It could just be two dead parents in the same show. There's a lot of characters, a lot of room for dead parent backstories. People, that's popular in stories. Maybe it's just a coincidence. I'm not coming down definitively on that, but I thought it was interesting. And even Sid with her not wanting to be touched, and the idea that she's isolated now from the world because of her problems that she has. All of these, again, are And don't get me started on Carrie and Carrie. Like if they are actually crazy, again, we're showed that that's not the case. But if this Clockworks universe, or not, yeah, like the mental institution, if they were all actually in a mental institution, that would be the most disturbing thing. She's probably of age, but he's still old enough where it's just like, dude, you're hanging out with the girl so much younger than you so much of the time. No, that's not. I mean, it's less creepy than the Eye and what he gets up to later, but no, it's just weird. So I really hope that they get out of this reality and into the real one. Oh, also, I almost forgot the Eye. Right, in our great psychoanalysis sequence that opens up the episode. Great editing in this, by the way. Just to drop in this as well. So many things to cover in this show. So dense. But the editing between the different patients, the way that it looked like she was asking, the previous patient a question, and then it would lead into, oh no, now she's like all of these people being connected. It was great. It was really great. There's no like transitions or anything. Maybe that plays into my theories. Maybe it doesn't, and I'm crazy. But the Eye gets in there and says more words than I think we've ever heard him say in the show. My wife, watching this show, asked, have we seen him talk ever? And I feel like we have. I didn't go back and watch all 5 episodes that came before to refresh my memory, but he's definitely more vocal in this episode than he ever has been, and we get kind of I don't even want to call it a tragic backstory, but whatever, the idea that it took him a long time to develop as a young boy into sort of adolescence, and maybe that affected him. That by itself, I don't think is enough by far to explain the stuff that's going on with him, but added into possible other trauma that he could have experienced around that, I think that there's something really fascinating going on, just that we're getting a little bit of an insight into him and what's going on with him. But throughout all of this, Sid has not been comfortable. Everybody else kind of buys into it. Nobody's like uncomfortable in the sense that they maybe not want to talk about stuff or they're evasive, but Sid straight out says, this is a dream. Not real. Doesn't feel real. I don't believe this. And, right after she says that, she sees this door in the wall. And here we have, again, coming back from episode 1, I believe, disappearing doors as a plot point. When is a door not a door? When it's ajar. They don't make that joke yet. I swear to you, I was sitting there expecting somebody to make that joke, or maybe in a future episode, because there is... When is a door not? Like, it seems like the show is actually asking that question. It's not, like, there's disappearing doors as a plot point now, as a visualization of something that's happening, and the door, as we know, leads to David's psyche. Sid doesn't know that at first. She just notices, hey, there's this weird door, doesn't fit the rest of the hospital, and she starts kind of picking away at this mirage of this dream world that's been set up, as we know now, revealed at the end of this episode, by the yellow-eyed demon / Lenny. Speaking of which, I briefly alluded to this before, but holy crap, that dance sequence, you guys, with Lenny, in a show that is utterly bonkers already. Regardless of what you think of what is gonna happen and what the twists are and everything, it's still, you got to admit, like, everything is weird and off the wall and doesn't, all line up if you're gonna ask for 100% logical sense. Even with that, and even with, in the first episode, having a musical number, all of that considered, it still feels like that Legion had to earn this sequence. It had to really, get you to swallow that bait all the way down to your stomach before it could yank the line and stick this hook in the lining of your stomach. This fishing metaphor went really weird, but if you've ever fished, sometimes that happens. But, just the craziness of how off the wall the yellow-eyed demon as Lenny, dancing through David's memories and his pain. Right, like all of these places where David was like experiencing trauma, all of these places where maybe the yellow-eyed demon was in control, we get to see her just going crazy with delight. And I don't know if we're gonna go with a storyline where the yellow-eyed demon feeds off pain and suffering, that it actually wants that, or if it's just sick and twisted and enjoys it just because it enjoys it. I almost like the second iteration better. If it's something that eats pain and suffering, well then, you can't blame it. I mean, if that's just is the way it is. If the yellow-eyed demon is just digging this because it's evil, then that's like a whole nother level. And the visuals here, the red streaking across the screen as she's dancing, and the way they cut between the different memories, it's just gorgeous. And absolutely, again, for people who are like, well, this was just filler. Listen, a lot of this show has not necessarily been running towards the conclusion, okay? We can say that there are many pieces of many of these episodes that could qualify as filler, if we're gonna say that. But an episode that had this in it, see, it's just incredible. It's incredible. It's beautifully staged, beautifully shot, animation and everything is just wow. We then cut to a different scene where, and this is something that I'd forgotten. I remembered vaguely, but somebody mentioned it in one of the Reddit threads. David goes into Sid's room and talks to her about, how he feels about being at Clockworks, and Sid kind of say the same. There's an opening shot to this scene where the door opens and then the door closes and you pan up over the bed and David's there with his bedroll, but you don't see any feet enter the room. And someone also mentioned in the same vein, there's a scene earlier where Carrie and Carrie are playing ping pong. I did not rewind to confirm this, so this might be somebody just being crazy. But someone said there's one of those shots where they're hitting back and forth and you hear the noise of the ping pong ball, but there's no actual ball there. It's just them miming playing ping pong. And the interesting thing is that shot where the door opens and closes and no feet comes in, that was mirrored in the first episode, the first Clockworks episode, the real Clockworks episode. And it was Sid coming in at that point, going to talk to David, same kind of thing, but different. I just love those little details. I love those little details. But more on the story side of things, Sid tries to convince David, hey, listen, this is not good for us, right? Like, we're here because we're sick. We need to get better. And David has slipped into this weird, he has a moment of conversation earlier or maybe it's later in the episode where he talks about there's no before once you're sick. It's just, you have a mental illness and that's forever. You're not going to get rid of it. And he has essentially resigned himself to this life. He says, hey, I feel good. It's good. I'm getting to paint and hang out with my girlfriend and take my drugs. I'm getting off of them a little bit by a little bit, but I'll probably be here for the rest of my life. And he's fine with that. And Sid says, no, this isn't enough. Like, you can't, okay, maybe this is a way station for us, but we need to get better. Even ignoring the fact this is completely a simulation and Sid realizes it, it's still an interesting character moment where Sid is trying to convince David to move on with his life, that he needs to do something else, to become something else, and David is resisting that. And I think that may be something that speaks to a lot of us, that if you get comfortable in what you're doing and where you're at, you can just sort of stagnate, whether or not you're in a bad place or whether you're trying to heal. You can just get satisfied with where you are and not want to move up and move on. But David says he's happy. Sid says she's not. And it's, we're kind of left with that. It's not, we don't get, they cut to commercial before we get David reacting very much. Sid doesn't necessarily say, I'm leaving you right now, but you can tell she's willing to. She's willing to get out of whatever this is that she knows isn't right, whether it's a dream or just, she wants to get better. Whatever this is, she wants to get out of it. And after we come back to that from the commercial break, we see them sort of having a similar conversation in a different setting. David's doing his painting now. He has red paint all over his shirt in a manner that looks a lot like blood, possibly indicating something going on in a different level of this weird, twisted reality that we have going on here. And him and Sid have an interesting conversation where Sid is talking about, the different problems that they're having, and she tells David about the door, and David says, well, listen, maybe you shouldn't tell people about that. Maybe you shouldn't say, I saw a door that wasn't there, and then it was there again and not, because, that relates to your delusion. And Sid says, what are you talking about? And it was a really creepy scene because I, along with Sid, could not tell whether David was right or not on some level. Like, maybe we've been missing something the whole time, because he tells Sid, no, you're the one with delusions, right? I'm not the one. I came in here with manic depressive disorder. That's my problem. You are the one who's been seeing things and making things up. And Sid doesn't want to believe it, obviously, but it is a little seed of doubt planted in her mind. My personal, probably 90% chance here is the yellow-eyed demon implanting doubt in her mind however it can, twisting things around from what she thinks they are, and changing this reality for everybody else so that she's off balance and maybe doesn't question what she's seeing. Maybe. But that small sliver of a 10% chance, maybe there actually is something else going on with Sid that we haven't known before, that we haven't seen before. That would also be interesting. Whatever the case, Sid leaves David, heads down the hallway, and sees something in the wall. Something coming through, some festering boil of flesh that's just poking through the wall. She gives it a poke, and it drains this stuff. And before she has time to investigate further, Lenny shows up and essentially kidnaps her. She says, hey, let me throw some headphones on you and try some music therapy. And, Sid, still sort of buying into the dream logic that she's in this psychiatric ward, agrees. Whatever this music is puts her to sleep or in a trance almost instantly. And in a really cool shot, we see her sort of fall back and float over through the door and into a bed in one of David's memories. So much weird going on in that particular exact scene that I don't know what it means for her to be put back in one of the memories with David, because she goes through the bedroom door. I don't know what all the sounds mean. Like the floating, I guess, is just her sort of, you sort of, when you're hypnotized or when you're in a trance or whatever, you feel like you're floating. I guess that's just a visual representation of that. But a weird scene, whatever it was. At the same time, as everyone's going to sleep in the institution, Carrie is confronted by the Eye, who turns out to be kind of a rapist. Super awkward, and the most interesting thing about this, other than the fact that it's referenced later and that the Eye is a bad guy even in Dream World, which I do like. I like, even though he's changed a little bit and he's willing to open up more and he's accepting that he's in a mental institution, he's either adapting, because we do see him kind of show up and disappear earlier in a hallway, and maybe that was just him like ducking into a closet. That's entirely possible. Or he's just doesn't care and he says, I want this Carrie girl, I'm going to go after that. It's an interesting balance, but the other interesting thing here is that Carrie isn't like much of a fighter in this world. Again, something the yellow-eyed demon probably changed to make things easier for it to keep this reality under control, because I mean, the Eye is not, we haven't seen him do very many karate moves, okay? He's not, within what we've seen in the show, he's not a big hand-to-hand fighter. So the fact that Carrie is scared of him and runs away and doesn't like put up much of a fight other than just sort of running away is kind of, very much not what we've known from her character. And even just her whole attitude has a lot of the fight taken out of it in this world. My wife thought that they actually replaced her with a younger actress, which I don't think, I didn't actually IMDb it, but I'm pretty sure that's not the case. It's just that she's acting much less actiony and mature and, is not interested in attacking everything here like she was before. And while action girl Carrie is being chased by the eye, middle-aged balding man Carrie is dreaming. And who does he dream of? It's Jermaine Clement in a diving suit in the astral plane. Yes, please. More astral plane all the time. Diving suit man to the rescue. Apparently his name is Oliver. Had no idea. Really, a lot of names in this show that I have not bothered to learn. As by the time we get to episode 8, I think I'll have about 90% of them. But Oliver comes to the rescue not only of Carrie the man, who is, who he apparently takes back to his ice cube. And it's interesting that Carrie was the one that was dreaming of the ice cube initially. Even before we see this scene, he talked about, I dream of a giant ice cube. It's weird. But Oliver also comes to his wife, and she sees him through the wall and pushes through, and we see a tableau of a frozen moment of violence where the mutant from last episode and the first episode, the guy who has the telekinetic powers, is holding a machine gun. And I think this is the guy. I could be wrong. I'm sure you guys will let me know in the comments if I am. Is holding a machine gun, firing at Sid and David. Sid is holding on to David, trying to shield him from the bullets. The bullets are in mid-flight, and we're essentially not quite frozen. There's the sense that this is a scene that is playing out, but very, very slowly. Time is not quite stopped. It's just slowed down a lot. And this is what I've got on that. They're in a separate reality. They're in a version of the astral plane. Who knows how many versions deep they are. But in the version deeper that they are, I've seen Inception anyway. I assume you guys have. You know the drill. You know that time can work different in the different planes. And what I think is going on here is that near the end of the previous episode, even though we didn't see everything that happened, David or the yellow-eyed demon or the yellow-eyed demon using David's powers took everybody to a safe place, froze time so that they would have time to figure out how to fix the problem that they're having here. And the fact that they can travel from Clockworks to this reality, well, it could just be a dream. Or if it's the real reality, if it's an actual representation of sort of what is actually happening being frozen, it points to possibly both of these realities being a construct. But that doesn't mean that David and Sid aren't in danger. It's just a different kind of danger. There's still a lot of questions to be answered. The bullets are traveling towards them. There's also the fact that Sid is holding on to David. There's not definitive skin-to-skin contact, but I would not be surprised if that might have been happening as well, where they've swapped places. David is in Sid's place, or they had swapped places before. Something could be going on there, but Jean Smart can't stop the bullets. She tries to pull them out of the air. They burn her hands. She's not able to do anything. And then we see, eyes open up in the wall, which is the best. So much. Oh, the Salvador Dali moment, man. For real. One of my favorite Dali paintings is a concept art for Alfred Hitchcock film, actually. And it's got all these eyes just on stalks and hanging from the ceiling, and they're great. It just totally reminded me of that. And from there, we cut to Lenny having a session with David, who's gotten up, who's looking for Sid, can't find her because she's out of this world now. And Lenny just tears it all off. Just essentially lets us and him and everybody know, listen, I'm the bad guy. I've been with you since your childhood. I knew your father. I was essentially with you since you were a fetus. The father thing is, I will say this. It's interesting. We have Legion, an X-Men comic book character, and somehow we're through 6 episodes where we haven't addressed any X-Men stuff, And we haven't even addressed why he's, like, fully acknowledged why he's called Legion. That seems, I mean, he's not called Legion yet in the show, but the show is called Legion. It's for a reason, guys. Like, it's not just a random name that they picked that would sound cool. I'm just fascinated by how they've managed to avoid any kind of actual comic book stuff happening so far. Not any, I mean, we do have, people throwing people, we have powers, but the actual tie-in to the real comics has been nebulous until now. And this is a hint, I think, at some of that stuff. That's what I'll say. I don't want to go any more spoilery than that, based on what I know from the comics, because I know some people are just watching the show as a show. And for you guys, this is like, what an experience to I don't know. I hope that when they find out what's going on, when we find out what's going on, because I don't even have all the answers, or even if like half the answers, but there's some stuff that they've leaned pretty heavily towards, and this seems like it really pounds that nail a little further into the coffin of who David is and who he's related to. And Sid, bares her soul, Lenny bares her soul at David, and then we see the yellow-eyed demon come out, and then she sends him to the worst place. And I gotta say, as someone who has a fear of claustrophobia, the way this was represented, David stuck in this tiny glass box upside down, was just, I don't even know if he was literally upside down or if we were just seeing him upside down, but they just twisted that knife of, yeah, it's bad. It's not good. I'm okay. But this show definitely hits you hard. And we close off with the diving suit, Jermaine Clement finding Sid and taking her hopefully somewhere safe. And that's it. That's this episode. I'm not even going to talk about the next week on Legion thing because it almost gets too spoilery. I mean, my theories are just theories, but for them to actually come out and say in the teaser, hey, this is what is going on, y'all, it seems a little bit much. But I'm definitely looking forward to it. I think that we're getting through this whole story in a really interesting way. They've just ordered a second series of Legion, season, as we say here in America, and that is interesting to me. I am thinking that the season that we're watching is going to be very much a self-contained, like, you had the questions and you got a lot of answers, and that we're gonna see a resolution to whatever this story is at the end of this season, and get a different. It'll probably have the same characters or some of the same characters in it next season, but definitely see something new and interesting and a different take on this weird world than we had already seen in next season. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to these final 2 episodes. I think they've stretched things out a little bit more than I would have liked, especially on the story front. Just sort of, I'm waiting for a lot of these answers that people have been guessing for a while. But I do feel like that we're finally starting to get those payoffs in good time, right? These final 2 episodes are going to pace out. We're going to get a lot more answers, a lot more payoff, and wrap this baby up. Noah Hawley killing it. As always, I'm killing it on this recap. Don't forget to leave your comments or theories or disagreements. Those are always welcome in the comment section of this video. I love reading those. I love hearing what you guys think. And I will see you guys next week with another episode of the Legion Recap. Take care, guys.